Hey everybody, so I'm about to wrap up a new painting, and I often wonder if everybody's going to enjoy looking at it as much as I enjoyed creating it. And that really begs the question, what actually makes something beautiful or interesting? Now, painting or art in general is a very personal thing. We all know this, so I'm actually going to kind of tiptoe around the whole subjectivity thing. However, the notion of art itself is actually very simple. Art is a connection between the viewer and the audience. And today we're going to look at how we can possibly connect to the audience with our lighting. Now, a huge part of creating and consuming art and related mediums, and that is to find, establish, and enjoy connections, especially during these times of quarantine. Sometimes when I'm watching a movie, playing a game, or browsing art online, I like to stop and think why I find it appealing of all. Of course, we know it can be for a number of reasons, like the subject or genre, the medium, to the technical skill. And for many artists, we pour our heart and soul into creating portraits, landscapes, sculptures, photographs, etc. And then we bravely post them online, only for no one to even notice. A few weeks ago, I uploaded a video regarding art portfolios, and I mentioned one of my pillars of a great portfolio is, in fact, lighting and composition. And today I'd like to take a closer look at lighting in some of your work and why it might not be exciting enough to connect to a viewer or your audience. Perhaps you overlook the importance of planning out your lighting a bit. Maybe your painting fails to capture the essence of a scene, and as a result of this, your staging of your elements lacks a clear and concise message that can potentially dilute any significance that it may contain. Lighting is hands down one of the most important elements in visual production and has the power to single-handedly alter the mood and perception of an entire scene. On a more macro level now, the lighting position alone, more often than diffusion or tone, is probably the most vital aspect to control. Lighting affects our moods, it distorts space and time, and it alters our perceptions of what we see. The solution here is simple. You gotta first think what you want to say before planning out how to say it. Now, there's a lot of ways you can plan out the lighting. Like my student here, he straight up did some swatches, he did some color strings, tried the gamut mask. He had a very specific type of mood and feeling he was going for. You can see it kind of develop over the course of a few sessions here till he kind of had it fully realized. And that did take a lot of back end planning, which you're about to kind of see kind of roll out now. And it's one thing for a lot of us is that we do tend to get caught up in the narrative and generally just default to the first lighting that comes to mind. And for most people, honestly, that's usually an overhead 3/4 light or some variant on that. The light's coming from the left or it's coming from the right. It describes form rather well. It can be interesting, but it always doesn't best serve the story. Remember, things that are easy to visualize may not best serve what your scene actually has to say. And again, it can therefore flatten it out. It can make it less interesting, but they do tend to be easier because they are familiar, right? Just general lighting in general, as we see it every day, is easier because we see it most often. But often enough, more creative placement of lighting can give a major boost to drama. And when we have that drama, we'll create appeal. And when we do have that appeal, that's where we can start to connect, right, with the viewer a little bit more. And that does take planning. So like, for example, here he had a fairly typical dark, drab, mundane setting. But when I start to really punch in the green, I focus on making the silhouettes in the actual comp a little bit more, and I drop in a light that doesn't exist, like a general like overhead little spotlight just hitting the corner of it. I'm vignetting the house, and I'm working on dark on light on dark to really bring through the actual form and the subject. Now I'm adding a lot of balance overall with subtle hints of warms and cools, and well, they're greens and yellows and a little bit of red, but it really adds that punch to drama to it. And of course, each of these are telling their own sort of story. And as you can see here, this had a hint of nice morning light kind of coming through, but we're just playing that up. Things are a little bit cooler. Things will feel a little bit more tranquil, right? It's telling a slightly different story. Whereas right here, it's warm. It's a little bit more comfortable overall. We can play in some of the bounce light, but it's a different angle. It's different sets of neutrals. So here, of course, we have the final results of that session. You could see we did punch them up overall from the original ones. Some of them are a little more subtle, some are a little bit more forceful. The lighting in the first image really invites us to a warm cup of tea, while in the second, it's completely the opposite. The green makes us feel uneasy. The mist hides what may lurk about. Now on the bottom, of course, the bottom left, we're comfortable, warm harvest season. It reflects the passing of time and hard work, while on the right, that cool light shows a sense of optimism and sets us up for a long day ahead. Now planning, whether that's in color roughs, sketches, or comps, is something to put a lot of value in. Colors do set the mood. They tell us a story as much as the drawing does. Consider what emotions you are aiming for, what they make you feel, and how the angle of light, the softness or harshness of it, and of course how the color affects that mood as well. With our art, we are always visualizing how something looks, how it feels. How we use the principles of light can affect our statement, how we connect to an audience. If we stick too close to the physics of the real world and forego the artistic side of making decisions, our paintings will come off as static, stiff, and perhaps too derivative. One way I commonly summarize this notion is that the work simply does not capture the essence of our subject. Maybe it is too literal, maybe it's just directionless, or perhaps static and lacks that personal touch that resonates in us. We live in an art-directed age. Photographers, marketers, cinematographers, editors, they all curate what we see. And as artists, we can too. We have the power to break the laws of physics to suit our needs, where they are purely to make something more entertaining, perhaps to express a specific emotion. For myself, I always try to simplify reality down to the simple shapes, lines, or emotions. It's beauty and emotion that drives good art. And that's the exact feeling that I had when I looked at this student piece originally. I just couldn't exactly connect to it yet personally. It was just a little too static. It was a little too stiff. The lighting wasn't doing enough to kind of capture my own imagination, to transport my imagination here to become like part of this image, to experience part of this image. These paintovers are kind of quick and brief. I think there's a benefit in that, and then I can just quickly kind of put my stamp on it. I can express a gesture of what could be a longer kind of formal painting, and that I could, go with my gut instinct on something like this. So I'm trying to, of course, break down, simplify a lot of the shapes. I'm trying to create a sense of movement with them, and I'm doing a little bit more of asymmetrical lighting. The original version, it was bright, it was sunny, but it was very flat in the delivery on that. It didn't have the dynamic range of a typical overcast image, and it did not have the sharpness or interest that a direct lighting can do. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm bringing in a little bit more of a direct lighting, and I'm trying to expand the story. So when do we ultimately know when to follow the laws of physics and light, and when to break them to suit a composition? I feel it's really about achieving balance and comes down to the look or feel you prefer. I'm personally a fan of embracing realism more at the beginning of the image, with the hope that it gives a piece more authenticity and allows the viewer to really feel the weight of a scene. It took me years, though, to learn that I can let go and not be wholly tied to the reference, that I can appreciate that sometimes you need to suspend disbelief in service of a story or goal. Being expressive with our lighting and shapes can open up new styles and different interpretations on the expected. Now, a good artist can take something ugly or mundane, like a messy desk or an unkept backyard, and yet capture the subject in an appealing way. Or conversely, they can take something beautiful and downplay it, making it feel ugly. The light in which we cast on our subjects holds the utmost importance. It's one of the most powerful tools for telling visual stories. Now, with staging, we are tasked to arrange all the elements in our paintings and our scenes, from the characters to perhaps how they move to the type of lighting. Often what I do see is students will set up decent enough compositions, characters, but they'll undersell the whole idea by poorly placing the lighting. So how do we effectively stage good lighting for our scenes? For me, it's always the type of lighting that tells the clearest story. Especially for complex scenes that often require setting up the lighting scenarios that make the shapes of a scene. Think of the silhouettes. Absolutely pop while simultaneously filtering out the needless details that otherwise dilute the whole message. As you can see in this example, without changing anything major structurally, and by simply making a series of subtle shifts in the lighting, I can take the viewer on a journey right into the setting and show them a bit of a spectacle. Here the artist was trying to depict this fantastical place with a really unique visual cues specific to this setting, but they were entirely sabotaged because they staged the lighting in very expected and very grounded places. It's just a very typical sort of street scene. There's not any overly shapes that are jumping out, and that's what I'm trying to fix here in this scenario. So I'm masking out a handful of detail in the background. I'm making it so we can see the shapes of the houses, see the shapes of the people, and of course, most importantly, see the shape of that magic castle in the background. Usually the best solution in a picture like this, and in many pictures, is the simplest solution. So I'm not trying to, in a sense, oversell any of these more typical elements that we'll see on any kind of street scene. I'm trying to find what's the most important aspect here. Like in the original, I just didn't get a sense that these coils and that these wires were coming down. It's just with a good staging, many elements should flow or highlight a singular focal point. In the original, that exactly was not happening. This castle was barely recognizable, and it was much harder to sell those coils that were flowing down, powering the whole town. I didn't even notice that at all. So that's what I'm doing here, as I'm making these two aspects a lot more obvious. A poorly staged scene will just often confuse the audience or the viewer. And so I'm adding a few more structural support elements to it. That's really the only thing I'm actually changing here. Make sure that they're bright, clear. We're picking up various types of lighting on the edges and on the curves, highlighting a few of the edges of that building with this overhead lighting that I dropped in right above that castle. There's no reason for it should exist, and moonlighting doesn't function that way. But on a scene like this, I'm taking that creative liberty to service the idea. The other major thing that I have to start addressing is also start to affect the ground with that lighting as well. And I can use the light and the direction of it to increase that movement on the bottom edge without going too far, of course. So I punch in a little bit more color in the background. I feel like with a painting like this, I can subtly start to enrich it with a little bit of color, particularly if it's slightly worldly like this. I think that'll definitely benefit. And so that's where I'm just pushing that last 20% here in the final stages as I wrap this up. A little bit more ambience, a little bit more fill light coming in, obscuring the least of these important elements here. And of course, just adding a little bit of texture in regards to that lighting cascading across the floor. So you just have to make a few shifts. And it gives us the sense that the lighting is hitting that floor just a bit better now. Now this is very safe so far in regards to I just muted the entire bottom. The original was very warmly lit, and I don't want to change the original artist's idea. So what I try to do with a lot of my students is like try to bridge that gap between what my idea is and theirs, and see if we can find a good solution that's mutually beneficial here, for the picture and the artist's vision. So I'm going to slightly warm some of the stuff back up here to just kind of cue it to some of the original color palettes. And so lighting in a painting is extremely crucial and takes years, if not decades, to really comprehend and master. It's one aspect among many disciplines of art and design that can serve as a bridge between the raw technical skill you have and the emotional level that art resonates with us. As we looked at today, lighting can help cultivate the viewer's imagination and establish a connection between them and our paintings. It's just one aspect in why your paintings, of course, may not be getting the traction that you want. Hey everybody, thank you for watching. And of course this month I'd like to give out a shout out to my patron Patricia Takahashi. It's vivid, it's colorful, and it's quite engaging. So check out her work at behance.net/Patricia Kellen. There's wonderful characters, vivid worlds, and wonderful stories here. And guys, head over to my Patreon, of course, if you want to help continue to support content like this. It keeps me out of the freelance scene and more content creating for you guys. Take it easy. Guys, thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe if you want to see more. You can check me out on Facebook, ArtStation, and Instagram. If you want more in-depth content from me, I teach 2 courses at the CG Master Academy, Architecture Design and Fundamentals of Design. If you want even more learning, you can go to brushsauceacademy.com and sign up for one-on-one mentoring. Join the hundreds of students around the world and start improving your art and design today. If you want to be part of a community, we have Brush Sauce on Discord. We have monthly challenges and hangouts. There are links below for everything I mentioned. Thanks again for watching and take care.